Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and hope everyone's been having a very enjoyable conference and tutorials here at EuroSciPY. It's definitely my pleasure to be here. I've been to certainly SciPy in Austin and before that in Caltech on a number of occasions, but this is my first time in EuroSciPy, so I'm very glad to be here. So I was able to also have the privilege to give a tutorial, and so for the talk I was going to try to be a little bit more high level about Bokeh and talk very briefly about sort of where it's been and then a little bit more high level about sort of where we are and things that you can do today with Bokeh and give some examples of that, and then talk a bit about what's sort of up and coming. So, so let's get started and talk first about sort of what we've come to have today. So a lot of things that have been added very recently, and in fact, I should mention, keeping in the tradition of announcing Bokeh releases at SciPy's, 093 should be out later today. But in some of the newest, latest releases, we have things like new tools and annotations for creating visualizations and plots. So more sophisticated selections, things like lasso selections and poly and point selections, inspectors like crosshairs, hover tools for lines. We just recently added horizontal and sort of vertical spans for annotations as well. We've also had a visual design pass, so we've had the ability to have some designers come in and give us some pointers as engineers how to make things look a little bit better, and also to clean up some of the user experience and streamline some of that as well. So I'm very glad for that. Docs, another thing that's been getting a lot of work lately and will continue to get more work, so we certainly heard what people have said. And so some of the things that are new or recent in Bokeh are, for instance, 100% complete reference guide, so we automatically generate our reference docs, information about all the available properties, including reference plots and live plots inside the docs. But another really nice feature that's new is a completely new user's guide, and it's actually been written sort of from the ground up. And I kind of want to point that out because I think it's really important and a great source of information. So let me jump over to Safari. There we go. So this is the new user guide. As you can see, it has a lot of different sections, right? So there's sections on the plotting, Bokeh.plotting interface, the Bokeh.models low-level interface, configuring plot tools, working in the notebook, adding interactions. So you can go to all of these, let's do plotting with basic glyphs, and take a look. And you can see that all of these have code examples as well as the code that, or the plots that generated from those code. So hopefully this is a really good source of information. I encourage everyone to check that out. Okay, so in addition to that, we've also added a new callback mechanism to be able to have very sophisticated static documents, right, that don't require, for instance, a server. So we've relented a little bit here by doing this, right? So the idea is that, we used to say you don't have to write any JavaScript, but now we've realized that if folks are willing to write maybe a few lines of JavaScript, they can get really sophisticated interactions, in documents that you can just email to someone without any kind of additional scaffolding or servers or anything like that. So that's a new feature that's been recently added as well. Also, our Bokeh came out last year. We've actually had several bindings for Bokeh be created. There's Julia bindings created by Samuel Colvin. There are Scala bindings created by one of our developers, Mateus. Someone just on the mailing list came and asked about making Haskell bindings. I'd love to see bindings for Bokeh everywhere. But a big one last year that came about was our Bokeh, which was created by one of our XData collaborators, Ryan Hathan. And so we're really glad to see that, and we're going to help try to push that forward and support that as much as we can. So that's sort of where, the recent past, sort of where things have arrived at. So what's going on with Bokeh today? So one thing is to sort of set the stage here, and I'd like to sort of look back to just about a year ago. This was at SciPy in Austin 1 year ago. We released 0.5 at that SciPy, and I was very pleased to sort of see the adoption and see the use of Bokeh. But just a little over a year later, it's really astounding, and this is actually very humbling to me. I mean, I know those numbers are inflated somewhat because of continuous integration systems installing Bokeh, but even if it's a tenth of those numbers, that's really incredibly, like I said, humbling and gratifying to see. This is all possible actually because we have a really wonderful team of people. Not everyone here works on Bokeh full-time. In fact, probably not really anyone works on Bokeh sort of full-time, but there's a lot of different areas that need help and need attention. We have Sarah Snatt providing wonderful design guidance for us, and Havoc Pennington is working on some Bokeh apps and simpler usage experiences. Damien Avila is a core IPython contributor, but he also works on our build automation. He does an amazing job. He gave a great talk at the last SciPy as well. A ton of other folks who are working on a variety of things, for instance, client work that focuses around Bokeh but contributing back, and so there's just a bunch of great stuff. Peter's off there in the corner because he doesn't actually write code anymore, so he does good. Yes?
Do you really have a guy called Havoc?
Yes, Havoc Pennington. So he's one of the original GNOME developers, if you go back that far. But yeah, it is his name. So anyway, so let's talk about some of these features that I mentioned that we've recently added and what you can do today. So this is, I mentioned static documents, dynamic interaction. And what I mean by static documents is that the data is embedded in the document, in the HTML document. And so it doesn't require having any kind of external server or either REST server or a Bokeh server or anything like that. And so this is actually a reproduction that Sarah Bird created. She gave this a talk recently at PyCon last year that was really phenomenal. But she's created this recently, and it's a reproduction of Hans Rosling's demonstration he did at sort of the first famous TED Talk I think that I ever saw, where he had this really nice visualization of sort of the fertility rate versus the life expectancy for all kinds of different countries over the years. And actually, I think we can take a look at that. Maybe, if I can hit the right key. Just realized I haven't actually brought this up yet, so let's see if we can find it in the viewer. Live Googling. Okay, well that's taking a while to load. So you guys can check that out. That's on the NBViewer Bokeh site. There's a bunch of tutorials. In the very first tutorial, she goes and sort of reproduces this chart. But you can move the slider and you see the exact sort of thing that he showed, that Hans Rosling showed in his TED Talk, which was the evolution of this over time. So it's very nice to see. And so I encourage everyone to check that out. And this is really powered by that JsCallbacks mechanism. And again, I mentioned we're sort of relented just a little bit. We're saying, if you can write a little bit of JavaScript, you can actually, get a lot of powerful capabilities. But we'd like to remove even that burden. So the first lowest hanging sort of fruit, that we can claim is to sort of figure out what the common patterns are that people write with these sort of JsCallbacks and encapsulate them in sort of canned Python, objects and models, so that people don't have to write, JavaScript to do those kind of language bindings. Someday I'd love to see, just the ability to write these sort of callbacks in Python and transpile them into JavaScript. I think it's a really interesting problem. I wish I had time to work on it. We have some folks who, Continuum who work on things like Numba and compilers, and they may offer some help, or maybe Brython is another project that might be leveraged to sort of compile Python into JavaScript. Brython's a great package name, no relation to me, but anyway, someday that might be useful. But so if you're interested in that problem, sort of compiling and turning Python into JavaScript, please come help. It'd be a great addition, I think, to Bokeh. So there's a lot more information about all of these JsCallbacks if you go to the user guide, the adding interaction section. There's quite a few examples there of using different callbacks. In fact, let me go there as well. I'll go show that off. So if I go to the user's guide here and I go to adding interactions, we can see a lot of different examples down at the bottom. And so again, the nice thing about these is that, oh, sorry. Thank you. We'll fix that. There you go. So the nice thing is you'll see a lot of different examples here of adding these interactions. So there's one here to click the dots. There's one things. We can make a selection on this plot, and it simply copies them over into the plot next door. This is a little bit more sophisticated one that actually, computes the mean of the selected points and sort of changes the data source for another glyph to be able to change the line according to that. Hovering things as well. Here's a nice little interactor that sort of shows the window for where you've zoomed in. So lots of opportunities there, I think, for, again, sophisticated static documents. Another example that I want to show, sort of revisit, is the spectrogram example. And I've showed this off before too, but I'm coming back to it because we've had a chance to sort of clean it up and make it even better. So it's kind of sort of a touchstone application for us, because advancing the goals of making the spectrogram simpler and easier to use and sort of better to present really advances the broader goals of Bokeh as well. So let me also show this example off. And if we go behaving for some reason, but that's okay. So if we go here, this is the same spectrogram example that I've shown before, which when I bring on the screen, you'll see. There's a live microphone. It's capturing audio samples. It's doing an FFT of the data, and it's updating both the waterfall plot and the signal. And there's just a power spectrum computation down there as well. And so there's a little flash server that does this, and then it forwards it to a Bokeh application. We got some help from one of our designers to sort of theme it and make it look a little bit more visually interesting and appealing. But the main point is that from the time when I first showed this, a little over a year ago to now, it's almost entirely Python. There's still a little bit of JavaScript in this, and we want to keep moving so that it's less and less, and you can spell this in pure Python. It's not quite there yet, but again, it's sort of advancing and moving this one example forward helps us move a lot of the goals of Bokeh forward. So, okay. Great. So, that's something you can run today, and I'll get back to that. My slideology today is not going so great. So you can run that today. It's mostly pure Python. It's a lot easier to see. And again, the reason we sort of revisited it is because we wanted to make it customizable, show that it's really easy to embed Bokeh plots inside your own templates, inside your own custom view. So if you want to serve up Bokeh plots, from a Django or Flask or Pyramid or Tornado application, you can do that very easily and have it sort of show up in whatever visual style you like. Some of the things that have happened are some performance updates. This is certainly working a lot smoother and a lot faster than it did the first time I showed it, and that'll continue to get even better with some of the new server changes that I'll mention in a little bit. And again, that's mostly written in JavaScript. Next thing I want to show is this was created as part of our XData initiative. It's called the FEAT application, the Financial Event Analysis Tool. But I wanted to show off what it can do. And so you can create these applications that have custom tooltips that have interactions, things like pop-ups, and all of this is sort of spellable from Python very easily. And you can have these things and turn lines on and off and using that. So this is an example of something you can do today with Bokeh 093. So again, it's the Financial Event Analysis Tool. The idea here is to be able to ingest a lot of different data sources, SEC filings, news, and look for signs and signals of financial fraud in the market. And so this only uses out-of-the-box features of current Bokeh release. And I can't give a live demo, unfortunately, because there's sort of a big back-end component to it, but hopefully that nice video gave you a little bit of example of what's there. Another example, sort of returning to, is this Oceans in the Cloud demo, and let me go ahead and pull up that as well. Let's see if I can do this correctly this time. So here, if we go to the ocean slider demo, this is some ocean surface temperature data over time. So it's basically a big 3D data cube, and we want to be able to sort of investigate it. It's actually about, I think, 4 gigabytes. And what you can see is that I can sort of scroll through there and see progressive refinement. And so this is, again, something that we showed off before. But the reason that we want to show it off again today is really because, again, it's much more Python these days, right? When I showed it, again, something like a year ago, it's something that really no one else could sort of run. It was sort of a demonstration of capability. But now this is something where the code is about to be checked into the repository. As an example, it's a very short, small amount of code, uses a little bit of a JavaScript callback. But this is something that you could write and use today using a released Bokeh, right? Something that investigates and interrogates a larger data set, does some downsampling, and is able to sort of interactively look at those. So this also uses the recent Ajax data source that was added. So this allows you to query a REST API to hit some REST server and pull data back from that and ingest it directly into the client. So this is not the same as the Bokeh server. This is the ability to hit any REST API you like. And so you spell your plot in Python and say, I want to connect to this REST API, and then in the client, in the browser, that data is loaded directly into the Bokeh plot in the browser. There's obviously a little bit of JavaScript there, but I would say there's still too much. There's about, I think, 10 lines or something. This is an example of where there's probably some common patterns we can factor out where things like data bindings. I want to bind a widget to this field, and we can just make that happen automatically. So we're almost there. We're not quite there, but still, it's something you can write today much more easily than you could. This was written with Tornado for the front end, and is a very, maybe 20 lines of Tornado or something very short, and then Dask to do the decimation. And speaking of Dask, just to show it off, this is a demonstration of, I think, the Dask, breakdown that does some computations like that. So if you're not familiar with it, it's created by Matt Rockland, who was mentioned in a talk earlier today for the tools talk. And it's a distributed array scheduler, and the idea is to be able to chunk up your computations and sort of move them through different pipelines and in the right order and combine them at the end on a multi-processing system. But they've added a nice tool to be able to create dot files for graphs, and actually one of our other developers went ahead and did that. I love when people do stuff that I don't think about or know to do myself. converted the dot files to bokeh plots. And so he didn't just create like an image and load the image, which is sort of what I assumed he'd done. He actually interpreted the dot files and used things like the quadratic and cubic spline functions that are available in Bokeh that probably don't get a lot of use to actually create a real graph with real elements. And so he's in the process of adding things like having this sort of be a live graph that updates as the scheduling is happening, and other annotations about things like memory or CPU usage, and just being able to sort of make that better. So I was really excited about that. But that was pretty neat. Anyway, if you're curious about DAS, you can look at das.pydata.org and find out more information. So again, all of that was converted to Bokeh glyphs, and we'll have live monitoring. So what is in the future? What is sort of coming down the pipe? Let's take a look at some things that are coming up. So one thing is LaTeX annotations. People have asked about this a lot. So one of the things about Bokeh I will say is that it's somewhat of a large client JavaScript library. And so we're in the process of making the library decomposable into multiple components and also extensible so that you can add your own new components. And I'm really excited about that. But that's one of the pieces of work we want to sort of get out of the way first, because some of the LaTeX libraries are a little bit large. The one we're looking at is actually KaTeX. I think it's the Khan Academy's sort of math text implementation. But we're looking to add that in the next few months, right? So there's someone working on a text annotation and arrow annotations right now, and this will be sort of a nice follow-on to that in the near future. Obviously, something else people ask for a lot, especially probably in this crowd, is static SVG output. We're still working on this. This is a surprisingly sort of tricky technical question to do. First of all, Bokeh is primarily canvas-based in the HTML canvas, which is raster-based, and so SVG isn't really a concern there. And so how do we get out data anyway? It's kind of difficult to get data out of the browser in the first place. So there's a couple of options. The long-term plan is to use MPL. So the Matplotlib folks are working on MEP25, which is a serialization scheme for Matplotlib to be able to read and ingest JSON and export Matplotlib into JSON. That will allow a lot of projects, not just Bokeh, but Plotly and MPLD3, to really integrate much more tightly with Matplotlib. And so once that's in place, we can use that to generate static images. And they put person-years worth of work into generating fantastic static images. So that's the long-term plan. But that may not be ready until next year sometime. So we might look at sort of a stopgap solution involving Cairo or something, a separate tool for doing. New charts and faceting. I'm happy to say we have some new people working on this a lot. We have Fabio Pleiger and Nick Roth. We've been making a lot of progress on this. So the charts interface is a high-level interface for Bokeh. It's intended to let you do a lot with sort of one-liners, sort of canned, schematic, common statistical charts. But we really want to be able to support things like auto-faceting and all kinds of grouping and stacking. And so we've done a little bit of experimentation. I'll definitely say it's the sort of the least mature API in Bokeh. And so I think that we've reached a point of sort of satisfaction with what we'd like to do, and we're going to be moving forward on that pretty aggressively here soon. Also, some validation was added recently in 0.9.1. So the idea here is that because Bokeh is this cross-language project, it's a little bit complicated sometimes, right? You create something in Python, but it doesn't actually get used until it gets into your browser. And so how do we inform people ahead of time that there might be some kind of problem? It's certainly not good to run your Python code and then you open your browser and there's just this empty plot and you don't know why. So we've gone ahead and added a validation step when the Bokeh plots are serialized, and you can get a lot more descriptive and informative errors if there's some problem with the way the object graph is configured or put together. You should get a lot more information about that. So the next thing I want to show off is a couple of demos around Bokeh authoring. So this is some tools that we're working on as well in hopefully the near future. So people have asked, where is Shiny for Python? And that's sort of one of the things that we're interested in helping develop. And so Havoc is actually working on a lot of this. And so this is just a prototype of sort of part of that. The idea is it would be really nice if you could have sort of an interactive, iterative style where if you had your plot open in some editor, perhaps even in the browser, where if you made a change to the file and you saved it, then you would see the plot update. And that took a little bit longer than I expected, but there you go. So you can imagine saying, hey, I want to change the radius as well. And so I changed the radius and it updates. And we see a new plot that has this new radius that's not scaled by, I don't know why that didn't work. Yay, live demos. So anyway, the idea is here to have a very rapid iteration cycle. And so you could have something where you can edit and style and look at your visualizations very quickly. And so this should be some component of that. Can we wait till the end? Is that OK? Thanks. So that will allow us to let people iterate very quickly on their plots. All right, speaking of, it's a little video of that as well. Theming is another thing we want to add, in addition to authoring, is to make it easier to theme plots. I realize this probably doesn't show up too well on that background, but this is an example of that sort of theme. We don't have an easy way to spell this yet, so that's what we're working on, is making it very easy to spell all kinds of different themes. And again, we have some wonderful help from Sarah to help us create visually attractive and UX-friendly themes that satisfy a variety of use cases. And the last thing that I want to mention is, well, not last thing, but another thing I want to mention is the Bokeh server is undergoing quite a revamp right now. So we're basically taking some lessons we've learned from last year and sort of reworking the server really from the ground up. And one is we're making it a lot simpler and a lot smaller. So I think we had confused some of the things that we wanted to be able to do by virtue of having a server with putting them in the server itself. And so that made the server a little bit overly complicated, and some of the different developers sort of developer cadences were a little bit different. And so we're making the server smaller and making it do sort of one thing very, very well, and that's to be this, which is this RPC mechanism that can have models written in, say, Python. They can be reflected into the backbone models in the browser. That can have this two-way communication. The models can be persisted and published, and this is really the foundation of having a system where you can publish plots that can be viewed by lots of people, that can have updates, pushed to the server that propagate out to the plots, and have changes from the plots go propagate back to the server, where you can run further computations or do things with selections, maybe even fire off something in a Spark cluster, something really significant, a place where interesting things can happen. So we're redoing the server from the ground up, basically a tornado. We're also moving to a WebSocket wire protocol. That should actually offer quite a few dramatic performance improvements in the network capability of Bokeh. We're going to support things like streaming and incremental updates of data as a first-class concern in the protocol, so that should be very good. So I'm really excited about that. That work has started. Some of it may land next month in the 0.10 release, but if not, we'll see some 0.11. As part of this, we're also, as I mentioned, splitting up Bokeh.js. We want to be able to make it multiple components so that you only have to load or pay for the parts that you're using whenever you load a plot into the browser. But in addition, we want to let people write their own models, new models, and extend this. And then really, then Bokeh becomes sort of a platform, and people can, use it to try out whatever they want without having to rely on or involve us, right? So if the new sort of cool JavaScript library comes out and you want to integrate that with a Bokeh application, you can write a model that will do that and lets you spell it very naturally with the rest of sort of Bokeh plots. Yeah, okay, great. So those are some things that are coming up. What else is coming up? Again, support for lots of different languages. We want to keep supporting R and Scala and I guess Haskell if that comes up. JavaScript, we'd love to get better JavaScript functional API. So obviously, whatever you can do in Bokeh, you can do in JavaScript. But right now, the functional API in JavaScript it could see some attention from like better JavaScript developers than me, who know how to do things like Angular and React integration. So I'd love to see that happen as well, and to make Bokeh.js something that JavaScript devs would turn to as a first-class thing. WebGL backend is underway. Some of that's actually going to land in 0.10. Let me see if I can bring some of that up as well. There we go. So if I go over to here, this was actually that sklearn, scikit-learn clustering. These plots are each 50,000 points apiece, and that was working 10 minutes ago. Let me try reloading it. Always nice. But anyway, so these are each 50,000 points, and we can sort of pan around and zoom those. This work has begun. We have some of the markers supported. Almar Klein, who's working on a lot of the WebGL work, is working on adding support for lines as well. So I'm really excited about this to really increase the reach of Bokeh into sort of not really big data necessarily, but to bigger data. And so that's really exciting as well. What else do we have? So later this year, we really intend to have a 1.0 release out as well. So I think we're going to be able to reach a level of stability where we'll be happy to call Bokeh, sort of here's a 1.0 line. And a lot of the work that's going to go into that is really around providing stability of APIs and stability of protocols. The new server protocols, for instance, all have versioned messages, and we'll have versioned protocols. And so we'll be able to support that sort of thing maintained under test a lot more easily. So anyway, that I think is just about everything. Quick few notes at the end. I'll say everything is BSD licensed, all of it. So you can go to GitHub and check it out. The Bokeh project, all the sub-projects, there's notebooks and Bokeh demos is the new repo there. All the Bokeh language bindings are there as well. And certainly feel free to come talk to me about engaging with us for all kinds of work. Any kind of work with us definitely helps push the open source efforts forward very well. The kind of feedback is very valuable. So that is all I have.
Any questions? one question, this WebGL front end, would it support to show 3D objects with shading in the?
So yeah, questions about 3D objects. So the eventual intent of the WebGL work is to be able to support some level of 3D plotting. I don't think we're ever going to sort of recreate an entire, 3D pipeline, like VTK. We're not going to write VTK in JavaScript, or at least I'm not. But the idea is to have some canned 3D plots that are especially useful, scatter plots, surface plots, ribbon plots. And the WebGL work that I just showed now is sort of the initial part of that to get that working. Yep.
Yeah, so it's really a stupid question, but when you show this example with dots, the n, so number of dots, was 4K. Mm-hmm. So how big this n can be?
Yeah, so the question is how big can n be when you want to show a lot of points? And that's sort of a layered answer to that. So if you just use the standard canvas backend, I mean, you can definitely throw up onto the screen, that's kind of a weird phrase, put up on the screen a few tens of thousands of points. And to enable interactivity at that level, we've recently also added a level of detailed downsampling. So while interaction's going on, it'll actually decimate the data set, and you'll get that interactivity, and you'll see a subset of the points move, and then they'll come back when you stop interacting. So that's with the canvas. And then the WebGL pushes us even further. As I mentioned, those were 4 plots that each had, I think, 50K points apiece, and I would expect to be able to have easily 100K. And then the intent behind the Bokeh server is to really be able to handle much, much larger data sets. And so the idea there is that the Bokeh server is somewhere that, for instance, the downsampling and decimation of very large data sets or querying of large data sets could occur. And so there, I'd love to see us move into the millions and billions of data points. And so that's what we want to get to. Obviously, we're not quite there yet, but our goal is to be able to handle very large data sets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions? When I Google on bokeh and astronomical data, I get a lot of blurry images. So the question is there any, do you know about anybody working on a astronomical data backend or FITS file specifically?
Oh, I see. So I have had the occasion to encounter quite a few astronomers. There's some astronomers at UT who come by somewhat regularly and come chat with us and have shown off some things that they've put together. Actually, at the last PyData conference, we sprinted with an astronomer there in the Redmond area, and he had a really cool application. But I don't know of anyone specifically working on, for instance, like FITS, easy FITS integration, but that would certainly be a welcome addition. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, okay, that's it.
All right, thank you.